I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday and we are diving into NFC quarterback rooms today, looking at the first 8 NFC quarterback rooms in our rankings. It's also rookie draft season. I believe I have 6 that are currently going right now. How are you faring, Dennis?
I have 5 rookie drafts and 1 reset draft from an Empire League going on right now. I must say, I've thoroughly enjoyed most of my rookie drafts because I've traded up substantially into the top 15, 18 picks and grabbed multiple players. And so far, I feel like I'm killing my drafts. I'm like one of the best. No, I take that back. One draft I'm in right now, I'm 10 picks away from making my first pick in the draft at 412. So other than that one, most of them I've had multiple first round picks.
I'm in the 6 right now, as I mentioned. I've made a grand total of 4 picks. It's some slow going out there. In our show league, I'm the defending champion, but the way I got there was by being the 2019 Los Angeles Rams or 2020 I can't remember what year they won the Super Bowl, where they were like picks are an illusion and traded everything to get. Yeah, I'll have a first round pick. Probably when we have a new president. Is the way it's shaping up right now. So not in this draft. I'm not in the first 2 rounds, so I don't think I have a pick till the 36th pick. You're wheeling and dealing. Our friend Ricky had half the first round. He's been wheeling and dealing, which has been fun. But in some of my other drafts,
I've been wheeling and dealing with.
Yeah, and some of my other drafts just is like slow going. I have to be honest. I don't really enjoy when people kick off a rookie draft and have no clock. I understand it is May the 2nd. But when you're sitting there and it's been like 23 and a half hours and nothing has moved on the draft board, I mean, why even kick off the draft if nobody's going to pay attention to it for days at a time? Maybe that makes me old.
Well, it's tough. There has to be a certain level of engagement by your managers. And if, we've had some, 8, 10, 12-hour stretches maybe. But by and large, I've been fortunate that the people who have been drafting in the leagues I'm in have done, they're ready. They were ready to draft too. So for the most part, it's went along fairly smoothly. Some picks are taking, minutes and others are taking hours, but people are talking and, they seem like they weren't thrilled with my trade with Ricky, but when I saw a chance to go up and get Ted McMillan, I was like, I think I'm going to take that shot. And
they weren't upset about your side of it.
Right.
You know what? I just don't. Let's not get too wild about some of these trades. If I thought it was way out of bounds, I would have. Yeah. I mean, I've seen you wouldn't have taken it because it's our show league. So and both you and Ricky, who are the trade partners, spend a lot of time studying prospects and film and spend a lot of time in fantasy football. So I don't really question. Everybody has a strategy.
It's not like we were doing trades with Cole and Beth, who between the two of them have a combined one dynasty fantasy season.
Yeah. So we talked about on Tuesday the prank call to Shedeur Sanders. The NFL handed out some punishment, $250,000 fine to the Atlanta Falcons, $100,000 fine for Jeff Ulbrich. How did you feel about the punishment?
I think you can debate whether or not it was sufficient. I know based on our last conversation, you don't. But
I mean, from the NFL side, that's probably fine. I'll just spend most of the season hoping that in September the Falcons give up an average of 80 points a game and he gets canned.
Right. Now, it is what it is. I think I do a really good job not concerning myself with things I can't change. And so as much as I might want to say, well, they should have done this or they should have done that, I don't think you chalk it up to, oh, it's kids being kids. Lessons have to be learned. But what we are not going to get a pound of flesh from Jeff Ulbrich when it comes to his child.
Yeah, well, I mean, $100,000 is a pretty stiff fine for
it. I get that, but we're not going to know what happened to Jax. He's still going to go on about his way. He learned a lesson, and Jeff isn't going to stop loving him. Jeff isn't going to stop being his dad. Jeff isn't going to stop mentoring him and trying to make him a good and competent adult because he made a stupid decision at 20 years old. It was horrible to do that to people. And society in general, though, if things like that weren't, I don't think accepted is the right word, but you've got shows going back to Ashton Kutcher and Pranked and, Alan Funt. And what was that? He used to do a show back in the 70s where they would play jokes on people. So, and we see it coming up with Practical Jokers and, the Jerky Boys and all of these things. And, even on morning radio here in Columbus, the local country and western station has a bit that's gone on for 25 years where they call somebody and get them all riled up about something. And so is it okay that that's a part of society? Apparently, because we keep watching it and listening to it, and human nature says, got to up the ante. Well, there's also consequences. If you don't know where the line is, you'll know when you cross it. He crossed it. He got caught, trying to get his, Jackson Mahomes social media fame. And, I feel bad for the guys that receive prank calls. I doubt that they were the first, though. I mean,
yeah.
Do you?
I mean, no, they're probably not the first people to do it. I'll be honest, like that's probably the difference between you and me. I think those prank shows, I refuse to watch that. I think those people are low class
they fall into the category of shows that actively make me dumber when watching them. And so I don't. But they're there. They're popular. They run for years and years and years. That was my point about them.
Yeah, and they're trying to make themselves famous, And if you can't be famous, you could be infamous, and that was probably what Jax Ulbrich will be for a while.
Yeah, that's going to be on his, resume. Don't think people don't go to social media nowadays when you're looking for a job.
Yeah. In other NFL news, Falcons.
What I'm saying is he's probably going to get a job with Barstool.
I don't know. I mean, you probably couldn't, because I mean, what would you do? No athlete's going to talk to that kid.
Right.
I mean, because of all this, if he wanted a career, who knows what career he's in, but if you were going for a career in sports media, you kind of screwed yourself. But I doubt that's what he was going for. I mean, I don't really know that much about him. I was more, I think what he did is dumb. What's I find more, which I think I said on Tuesday, is it's the breach of privacy and security on the part of the Falcons, who should know better, and a coach who should know better. That's the part that that was what I was more irritated about.
Yeah, I get it.
So, in other football news, Falcons picked up the 5th-year option for Drake London. Elijah Moore, who got that rare unrestricted free agent tender from the Browns, signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Bills, so he'll be going to Buffalo. And then Jordan Travis, who was pretty good at Florida State in, I think it was it 2020? It had to have been 2023.
Yeah.
Before getting injured near the end of the season, got drafted late rounds by the Jets last year, has decided to retire. Any of those three things, I think you and I have the same reaction. They were always going to pick up Drake London's 5th-year option. The signing of Moore and the retirement of Travis don't make a lot of difference to me for fantasy, either one.
Yeah, I think Moore has flashed a little bit, but for whatever reason, he hasn't been able to settle in somewhere, earn a consistent role. He had a less than stellar quarterback group in New York, and so he wasn't really able to, I think, get his footing there as the number 2 to Garrett Wilson. He went to Cleveland. I think there were a lot of hopes that he may be able to establish himself there, and they also brought in Judy, and he kind of took over, and then Cedric Tillman came on. He got Njoku, and frankly, they haven't had the greatest quarterback room either. I don't know how much different from Khalil Shakur Elijah Moore is. They feel a little bit redundant. And so it feels like he's their wide receiver 4, because he's not going to start over Shakur. And if they're running 2 tight ends, then you've got Kincaid and Knox out there. And then it seems Keon Coleman is their big receiver they like. They spent pretty good draft capital on him last year. So, it's like, where's his opportunity going to come from? That's not saying he won't earn it. He may. He was a pretty good prospect coming out, not elite by any stretch, but he was a pretty good prospect. So, I mean, if I'm him, I certainly want to go somewhere where there's a better quarterback than I've historically worked with, and he did that. Jordan Travis, I had a few shares of him. I felt like he was worth stashing on your taxi squad to see could he come back because of the way he performed at Florida State that final year. He isn't a big guy, but he's pretty mobile, had a good arm. I think he was 6 foot 6'1", not huge. But he had a lot of, he had worked hard. He'd had to face some adversity, and you really felt bad for him when he got injured because he was in the Heisman conversation that year. And his injury in and of itself knocked them out of the playoff. The playoff committee looked at them and said, yeah, we're not putting you in with your backup quarterback. And so they were out of it, based on their bowl game, that was the correct decision. And so there was, guys like us that are deep in the weeds here probably were kind of hoping and kind of pulling for him to come back from that injury. Maybe he got a little lucky and he was able to pull some NIL money before he came out. I don't know the status of that. And then, he did get, a year NFL contract. hopefully he got a degree that, in something that he loves doing, and he's able to, work a career after. Ultimately, based on the way that injury looked, I hope he can walk normal without a limp and doesn't wake up every morning at 23 years old with a pain in his knee and his ankle and his foot. So maybe the Jets do something like, hey, let's give you some front office training. We see that a lot of times with teams when there's a hard luck kind of situation. They'll offer somebody some mentoring in their front office and see if maybe that's a career they want to explore. Maybe something like that happens for him.
Yeah, I'm with you with more. I don't. It'll be interesting to see what they do. They just extended Shakur, as you mentioned. They went and got Palmer, and Keon Coleman is actually a player I thought improved his stock post draft because the Bills not going out and getting a substantive receiver either in free agency.
I forgot about Palmer too. He's the guy that seems to always show up but doesn't stay healthy.
Well, and they also have Curtis Samuel kicking around, and I saw some people speculating that this might be that they like Moore better, and they're planning to release Samuel. They did lose Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper out of that group, so adding Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer, they would have potentially the roster spots. But when we get to pass catchers for the Bills, they're a team that has a lot of options, but none of them lit my world on fire, and this didn't do a lot to change that. I like you. I think I had a couple of taxi squad shares of Travis. I was curious to see. I didn't think Jets was too bad of a spot when they went in 2024 because we had Aaron Rodgers there. Now it's more of a question, but I did make a joke, who would have thought of all the three quarterbacks the Jets had in 2024 that the first to retire would be Jordan Travis.
Right.
But, speaking of quarterbacks, feels like a good segue. We are going to start our unit grades. We are looking at the first half of the NFC quarterback rooms today. So why don't we'll just go back and forth alternating. Dennis, I will let you kick it off. What is your number 16 room in the NFC? And to clarify, this isn't just about the starter. This is about the entirety of the depth chart. We're going to be looking at quarterback rooms, NFC and AFC, and then running back rooms, NFC, AFC, and then pass catching groups, which is wide receivers and tight ends, NFC and AFC, looking at the strength of the unit. So, I know for me, as we go through here, there are some teams that have a great starting quarterback that have very little behind them. So they are not as high on this list as maybe a team that has two or three more average quarterbacks, but they have two or three guys who could start an NFL game. And we've seen that matters.
So at 16, I've got the Saints.
Yep. And the Saints depth chart, I will read off real quick. Derek Carr, who's a massive question. Tyler Shook, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener.
I mean, there's giant questions all the way down, and that's probably why we have them. We both have them at 16. Sorry to out you there.
No, I think if I had anything other than the Saints in last place, you'd probably have more questions.
Derek Carr, we clearly see the skills are diminishing. Injuries are popping up more and more. He does, he'll make some plays. He'll have some good games. He just doesn't seem to be able to put anything sustained together, whether it's because he face plants or whether it's because he gets injured. The Saints have been in salary cap purgatory for like 17 seasons now, and they keep shuffling. They tied themselves to Carr for a couple more years so they could afford to sign draft picks. And it feels like they've also put him in the same category as the Browns did Deshaun Watson. They're like, look, let's find an injury because we don't really plan on playing you, but we can't just let you go. And he kind of is injured. I forget what he's dealing with. Oh, a shoulder that kind of popped up out of the blue in the offseason. It's like, what the hell happened there? They drafted Tyler Shook in the second round. again, another guy that has some good traits. He's got NFL size. He's got an NFL arm. But he played 14 seasons in college because he kept getting injured. And I think he can. I think he could ascend to the role. I think it's going to be a trial by fire, and we saw how well that worked for Spencer Rattler last year. Rattler was a guy that I liked after the Big Six last year, but what I liked is the fact he could go somewhere and not have to play. Derek Carr gets injured, Jake Haener face plants, Spencer Rattler has to play. He wasn't ready, and it showed, and that really can wreak havoc on a young player's confidence. I think Haener showed that he's a journeyman backup at best, and I think Rattler is trending that way. We don't know what they have with Tyler Shough. Maybe he's something, maybe not. We don't really know, but it feels like that the Saints are going into the 2025 season with a first-year quarterback, a second-year quarterback, and a third-year quarterback. And it's I don't have high hopes for fantasy or for NFL prospects, which is tough because I have several shares of Olave and Alvin Kamara, and so that's going to be a bummer. Hopefully, I'll be able to save myself with special team shares of Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah, I think a big part of what knocks them back for me too is just the complete unknown of Derek Carr. Like you said, I also have them at 16, and we were wondering, is Carr really hurt? Was this a negotiating tactic? He gave a talk to a church last weekend where apparently he reiterated that he is injured and his season is very much in doubt. So I think that's
if he said it in church, we know it's true.
No, but I mean, if he's coming out and talking about that too, and the team took a quarterback in the second round, which is something they haven't done that big of a commitment since the 70s. It's just then so Carr's on here now, maybe they look a little bit better, but if he's unavailable, I think it's easily a lowest spot of all 32 teams. If you're looking at Shough, who's a 27-year-old rookie, Rattler, who looked rattled a lot when he was out there last year, and Haener, who
I see what you did there.
Look good in his starts either. I mean, you have three guys that have 3 seasons of NFL experience between them and like a handful of starts. I don't think they won any games that where Carr didn't start last year. I think Carr was the only starter that won games. So that's also a little bit negative. I'll give my 15 and then we'll go back. My number 15 is the Minnesota Vikings and their depth chart, which I will read real quick here. J.J. McCarthy, followed by Sam Howell, and then Brett Rippon. McCarthy went in the first round, but he's essentially a rookie going out there starting because he was injured and missed all of last year. No starts under his belt. Sam Howell, we saw him in part of one game last year, and he looked dreadful for Seattle. He had some moments when he was starting for the Commanders the season before. Their team wasn't successful, but he had some moments, but he had a lot of turnovers. Brett Rippon, another guy that's been kind of a career backup that's kicked around, that's made some spot starts. It's the lack of experience. I know you're a little higher on Howell than me. I'm curious about you and I will start to be really at odds when we get to your 15 because I have them way up higher. And the lack of experience, McCarthy could be great. He could be terrible. It was kind of looking mixed when they were in training camp, and we didn't really get to see anything much in preseason. And then he went out injured. I like Kevin O'Connell. That's probably a reason that they weren't really a consideration for me for last on this list, but there's a lot of room for growth. But you're number 15, an interesting one for me. Why don't you give the team and I'll read off who's on their roster.
So I have the Giants at 15.
And the Giants have free agent acquisition Russell Wilson, free agent acquisition Jameis Winston, first round draft pick Jackson Dart, and journeyman Tommy DeVito.
So, Russ looked bad last year. And I think we see the end coming. Now, Dayball has done some good things with quarterbacks, and maybe he's able to patch this season together so that they don't have to force Dart into the game to start a bunch of games. I'm not in on Russ. I get they've got the Malik Neighbors. I like that. Theo Johnson, the tight end, Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scattaboo at running back. Makes me feel like they are gonna. Well, my camera stopped working again. I did this last show too. Well, let me finish my soliloquy and then I'll log out and log back in. If Russ can, I'm not sold on Russ. When it comes to Jameis, I love Jameis, but I think we have to listen to what the NFL is telling us. He's been in New Orleans and Cleveland, and they don't seem to want to give him a chance. He did some, he had a pretty good first contract in Tampa, but when he got to the end of that, people just don't want to give him a shot to start anymore. It's like everybody expects he's going to throw 33 interceptions every year. And, while he's great on social media and he's great in the locker room and he's a team guy for whatever team he's on, I think that's helpful. But when it comes to winning games, is he going to be able to do that? Now, the third guy, Jackson Dart, seems to have a ton of potential, and they traded up in the first round to get him. But there are certainly some flaws to his game that need some NFL coaching. Throwing anticipatory throws versus zone, he tends to be a little bit see it and throw it, not necessarily I believe my guy's going to be where I expect him to be. Can get a little bit, because of his athleticism, sometimes his footwork isn't as tight as you'd like. Can question himself when he's making his reads, and that leads to, maybe not making the right decision quick enough. So, well, he's got a good arm and he's a good athlete and there's a lot of potential there. At this point, it's still potential. I feel like if this was going into 2026, I may have the Giants up where you have them, but I'm not as sold on Russ and Jameis as you seem to be.
And you have Minnesota, who I had at 15. You have them at 14. So why don't you share a little bit of, I'm guessing it's the lack of experience.
It is the lack of experience. Now, JJ seemed like he was poised to win that role last year, that job. And O'Connell, by all appearances, seems to be the quarterback whisperer. Now he's got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor. Aaron Jones is great in the backfield. They traded for Jordan Mason. They got TJ Hawkinson, and they've invested some in their offensive line. So it feels like he should be set up to be successful. But when you look back at his college career, there were a lot of games where Jim Harbaugh hit him. And, he wasn't, for whatever reason, he wasn't given the opportunity to take over the game, to lead from the front. And so he feels a little game managerish to me. I think Kevin O'Connell's going to do good things with him and he'll be successful. And, as much as I love Sam Howell, he was my guy in that class. When he got his shot in Washington, threw the most passes in the league that year, took a bajillion sacks, and threw a bunch of interceptions. Teams aren't going to go for that. He went to Seattle. They traded him. Right now, he's just trying to find some place where he can go and wash the stink of that season in Washington off him. And maybe that's going to be Minnesota. Right now, I expect he's probably behind Rippon, who is a journeyman game manager quarterback and nothing more.
I think they traded for him to make him the number 2. I would bet Rippon's the number 3.
Well, I think they're going to make him quote unquote earn it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You perceived McCarthy is on the verge of winning because when they talked about it all off season, they talked about Sam Darnold being their starter and that they were going to have McCarthy on the bench. Now, would McCarthy have gotten in if Minnesota had played badly? I think McCarthy, had he been healthy, would have been given a shot. But after the way they started, I don't perceive that we would have ever really seen McCarthy last year either. So I think that's part of why they were sort of happy that Darnold got a big free agency deal. But my what are we up to? My number 14, I went with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their depth chart, they have Baker Mayfield. I have no questions about Baker Mayfield. I think he's great. Behind him, Kyle Trask, who I don't believe has ever started an NFL game. And then they have Michael Pratt, who also has never started an NFL game and was sitting behind, I think he was third string for the Packers up until last year when he got released in free agency. So I love Baker, but this is one of the teams where they don't have any depth to me. And if something happened to Baker Mayfield, I would have some serious questions, especially since the one real problem for Tampa Bay is a complete lack of continuity in their offensive play caller. They seem to get a new one every year, and it's been an embarrassment of riches in some cases where guys have gotten head coaching jobs. That happened for Canales. Now that happened for Liam Cohen, but still lack of continuity, turnover. So that's a question for me. My number 13 is the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks current depth chart, Sam Darnold came in as an unrestricted free agent. They signed Drew Lock back. He was with the Giants last year, had previously been with them. He has quite a bit of starting experience going back to Denver, started in Seattle a little bit, started last year for the Giants, and then they drafted Jalen Milroe. So I don't think anything on there lights my world on fire per se. I definitely think Baker is a better quarterback as an individual than anything that Seattle has, but Seattle has a group that has more experience and a little more upside as a whole to me, and that is why I have them just one step above. It looks like you have, we'll go to you for your number 13, and I think your number 13 is who I had at 14, where I think now that the Giants are out of the way, it feels like we're a little bit closer here.
Yeah. I had Tampa a couple spots higher, and the more I thought about it, and I had him higher because of Baker and his fantasy production, and I really wanted to keep him there. But if something happens to Baker, it's going to be the Bucky Irving show, and that's pretty much it. So I ended up dropping him back down a couple spots. I like Baker. I think he's sort of settled into where he is as an NFL quarterback. And, he's comfortable in Tampa. They like him. Having Chris Godwin and Mike Evans certainly can make your life easy. The running game has done well with Rashad White as a runner and a receiver, and Bucky Irving coming on last year. He's had a connection with Cade Otton. They've added Emeka Egbuka to battle with Jalen McMillan. But yeah, that behind him, Kyle Trask and Pratt. Yeah, I'm out.
And then we'll do your number 12, which is who I just talked about doing in the Seahawks.
Yeah, I want to put them higher, but Darnold is just such an unknown. He kind of came in. He had the Geno Smith type of New York experience, and moved on, was a backup, and ended up as a backup in Minnesota. And O'Connell whispered in his ear, and he had a career year. we'll see what happens in Seattle. Seattle, second-year head coach, first-year offensive coordinator. Who'd they take up there? They
In
can grow.
Seattle, Jalen Milroe.
No. Their offensive coordinator.
Their offensive coordinator is Clint Kubiak.
Okay, that's right. So that honestly, if we, follow the Kubiak line, that could be a good opportunity for Darnold to have some extended success for a couple years. I like Jalen Milroe as the backup there. Giving him an opportunity to learn.
I guess would be Locke will be the number 2 and Milroe will be the 3.
Correct. But I would have them. The reason I am interested in that quarterback room would be because of Jalen Milroe, and his potential. Yeah. We Drew Lock is dollar store Jameis Winston. And I just think that if something happens, it feels like, so we're in week 7 and Sam Darnold gets clobbered and is going to miss 5 weeks. Drew Lock goes in and finishes the game. They have their bye week. Jalen Milroe starts the week after. They work him. That feels like, and maybe not. If they're smart, they roll with Lock and let Milroe continue to make the transition to NFL quarterback. They've got a good running game with Walker and Charbonnet, and they added the draft was so long ago.
Damian Martinez.
And
they still have Kenny McIntosh as well.
Yeah. And McIntosh flashed a little bit last year too.
I mean, we'll get to the running back depth chart. You'll know them intimately when we.
So, Seattle's got, I'd be nervous about the production if Darnold misses extended time. But we'll see. Kubiak and, if they get that running game flowing better than ever before with that, that zone blocking, Kenneth Walker could rush for 1,500 yards. And, we'll see what happens. So that's where I got Seattle at 12.
So for me at 12, I went with the Detroit Lions. I have the Lions depth chart, Jared Goff. I love Jared Goff. I think he's a great starting quarterback. Behind him, we have Hendon Hooker, who entering year 3 has never taken a snap. They felt so confident about him. They took a retired Teddy Bridgewater off the sidelines of the high school he was coaching and made him the backup quarterback to end the season. And then we have Kyle Allen, who's a journeyman who's been bouncing around. He's been with a ton of different teams. I think he's started a couple of games throughout his career. Doesn't do a lot for me. So this is another team where it's the lack of experience and depth that really holds them back, even though I really like their starter. And I was really torn between them and the team I have at 11, which is the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, I like Dak. I like Dak probably more than most. I probably like Goff a little bit better as my starting quarterback, but they're real close to me. What I was more interested in with Dallas is they went and acquired Joe Milton. And I know we only saw him play the one game, and it was a garbage game where he was playing against entirely backups. But I am interested in him as a prospect and his upside. They do also have Will Greer, not even sold he'll make the roster. But Milton, I was more interested in Milton. I thought to myself, if Goff and Prescott were gone and I had to choose between Hendon Hooker, Kyle Allen, and Joe Milton to start a game for me, it would be Milton every time. And so that was what kind of gave them the slight edge for me. But I saw you and I have Dallas in the same spot. They are 11 for you as well.
Yeah. I'm pushing pause on Joe Milton. Big arm, looked fantastic in one game. I think he was just a mediocre prospect coming out in college. He was very much a guy that didn't throw with much anticipation. You know, he's big, he's strong. He struggled a lot at Michigan before he went to Tennessee. I'd love to see Milton grow into something. Yeah, Dak, I think we're starting to hit the injury years. It seems he gets banged up more and more. Dallas has to pull that offensive line together. They need 2 more Tylers, and then they'll be able to protect Dak appropriately. Hopefully, the running game with Javonte Williams and was it Taj Boyd? Jaden Blue is who they grabbed.
Yeah, Jaden Blue, and they have Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. They have an interesting group, if not a spectacular or a reliable group.
Yeah. So, I've got Dallas here because it feels like we're seeing the window closing on Dak. Maybe he, performs at a top 12 level the next couple seasons. Maybe he gets injured again. Maybe CD gets grumpy and wants to leave. But I like Dallas, and I do want to see Milton develop. I don't know if Dallas is a good spot to develop quarterbacks. Historically, it just doesn't feel like, since the Tom Landry era ended, that they've been, either the quarterback shows up and has it and then is there for a good while, or they don't have it and they don't move on to any sort of glory. So got the Cowboys at 11.
And who is your number 10?
Number 10, I got the Carolina Panthers. And this one I'm torn on because Andy Dalton, by all appearances, would seem to be a top 1, top 2 backup quarterback.
Yeah, so if we're looking at just the NFC, I would have him as the second best listed backup quarterback because Kirk Cousins is still in Atlanta. And
so, but is he? He was a very mid starter. He was never an elevator. He had some good running backs. He had AJ Green. He was a pretty good quarterback, but he wasn't a difference maker. And I don't think as a backup, he's a difference maker either. He's a backup. He's a guy that's going to come in and do all of the right things. But Ted McMillan, I don't think is going to go from, 40 yards a game to 70 yards a game because Andy Dalton came in. So it's tough because you feel safe with him. He's a known commodity. He's probably not going to fuck it up, but he isn't going to make a difference either. And Bryce struggled his first year in 3 games or whatnot till he got benched last year.
Yeah.
But then when he came back, he played pretty well. We don't know if that's a mirage yet. We don't know if that's real. We know they've invested in the offensive line. They've invested in Ted McMillan. They brought in Jatavian Sanders and Xavier Legette. Jalen Coker popped off out of nowhere. When Adam Thielen came back, he provided that veteran presence. But we don't know for sure if Bryce Young is going to be the real deal. So I've got hope. I hope my shares that I roster hope that he's the real deal, or hope that he's real enough that I can move him at some point for something of value. So I probably am a little lower on Carolina than you are.
Yeah, and it's good to have some of these subtle differences. I think listening to you talk, I probably think Andy Dalton is a little more underrated as a starter than you did. I don't think he was spectacular, but he had some pretty decent seasons there for Cincinnati teams that weren't incredible. So that was your 10. My 10, so I'll give my last 2. My 10 is the Chicago Bears. Bears, Caleb Williams, was the number 1 overall draft pick. I like the potential there. Hopefully he can grow with Ben Johnson. Had a uneven rookie year for sure. Tyson Bagent, not bad for a backup quarterback. And then they did go and sign Case Keenum, who is probably one of the more experienced number 3 quarterbacks that you could have. I do like their group pretty well. Maybe I'm a little low on them, but that was where I felt like slotting them in. I think there's a lot of potential, but we need to see some of that potential get realized. And then my last one in this group, number 9, I have the San Francisco 49ers, and maybe this feels a little controversial. I don't know. I like Brock Purdy. I think he's been a solid starter. I think we saw last year with all the injuries that compounded that he came back to earth a little bit. Doesn't look quite as superhuman, which makes sense. I like Mac Jones as a potential backup and as a guy who gets to work with Kyle Shanahan and perhaps improve. But I don't know if he's the best backup they've had in recent years. And then they took Curtis Rourke, who is kind of currently listed as potentially their 3rd quarterback. He just got drafted in the CFL draft. There's no guarantee he goes to the CFL, but if he does, because he thinks he has a chance to play, that leaves even some more questions. They have a college free agent in Tanner Mordecai. Middle of the pack in the NFC felt about right for me with this group of San Francisco quarterbacks. I don't think it's a bad room, and I think Mac Jones is probably one of the more appealing backups if you go down all 16 teams, one of the more experienced backups, and it certainly looked good at times for a reeling Jaguars team last year, but that just was where I ended up slotting them. So what is your number 9 team?
So I have the Bears at number 9. So, it's not like we're way off there. I'm looking for some growth from Caleb Williams this year. It wasn't perceived that he had a great year last year. He had some struggles. They were open. He's, his body language and his demeanor, I think, can be a little bit off-putting when things aren't going his way. But he's in a situation now where Ben Johnson came in and basically said, I'm going to fix this offensive line. We're going to make shit happen. He traded or signed a center and 2 guards that were better than the ones they had, drafted 2 offensive tackles to go with the 2 they had that were all right, maybe not superstars, but all right. So now all of a sudden they've got a ton of depth at the offensive line. Added Colson Loveland with Cole Kmet. They have what could be a very productive tight end room. They had DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. They added Luther Burden after letting Keenan Allen walk. Now it just comes down to what's going to happen with their running back room. It's DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. They drafted a 7th rounder out of, was it Rutgers, Kyle Monangai?
Yeah.
So, we know Johnson basically got rid of Swift after 1 year when he arrived in Detroit. And I think most people expected that he was going to get rid of him again and that he was going to draft his own running back. Well, he didn't. And we'll see what happens. Johnson has come out and basically said that, look, everybody that thinks I'm just going to come in here and do what I did in Detroit is wrong. I'm going to come in here and do what this team can do. Well, now we got to wait and see what can they do. I like what Johnson did in Detroit, but not every quarterback can step up from coordinator to head coach and be successful. The jobs are not the same. And a lot of times when coordinators step up, they don't give up the play calling because that's what got them there. And that's what they're hanging their hat on. And sometimes trying to hold that and be the head coach too gets to be a little too overwhelming and things slip through the cracks. I hope it doesn't. I hope it does a little bit so that Detroit stays atop and we can finally get a Super Bowl appearance hopefully a win, but at least an appearance. But no, I think Caleb Williams is a very, very talented quarterback. He's still got a lot to prove. Tyson Bagent, I don't know, man. He's like the Gardner Minshew of the North.
Yeah, he's been a solid backup though. When he's had to come in, if he was the starter, they wouldn't be in this position for me.
Right.
But as a number 2, and then what really kind of pushed him a little further up. I know Case Keenum's getting older and hasn't seen the field in a few years, but that's pretty good experience.
It is. Having a veteran like that in your quarterback room, even if it's somebody that, honestly, having a veteran like that that's been around the league a long time, never had anything handed to him, has had to bust his ass to get every opportunity, has had to learn how to do the right thing the right way in multiple situations, has got to be good for your quarterback room. So yeah. I think Keenum can be a steadying force there in that quarterback room, because I think we've seen that Caleb Williams is emotional. That's part of what drives him to be as good as he was in college and to be, the number 1 overall draft pick. But you've got to learn to control that emotion, and maybe Case Keenum can be helpful there.
Well, that is the first 8 groups that we're going to look at, 16-9. We will be back not till next Friday when we look at our top 8 groups. We will be off on Tuesday as the Bradley Jaguars are finishing up. It's your last week of the season, right? Yeah, it's your last week of the
we
season.
Got games Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Hopefully we don't get rained out. We've won 4 of our last 5. We've really turned it around after an 0-6 start. I'm proud of Cole. He's caught, what was it? I think he's caught 54 out of 57 innings so far this year. He's 3rd on the team in batting, 2nd in RBIs. So he's been playing ours. He went into a slump when they put him in the cleanup spot. But to be fair, the guy before him was in a slump too, and the guy before that was in a slump. And so I told him, I'm like, look, we don't have a number 4 hitter anymore. We're going to treat the 4 spot like hotels treat the 13th floor. Our batting order goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Took a couple games, but we got on track. And now the boys hitting, playing well, both at both sides of the ball. The team is playing well. Hopefully we can, it's supposed to, weather report calls for rain for about the next 4 days. But when I look at the radar, it looks like it's just going to be spotty and pop up. And hopefully we get those games in, because I feel like the AD isn't going to work as hard to reschedule them with it being the end of the season.
Before we pop out of here, I thought I would give an update. We are doing our rookie draft for the Roundtable Dynasty League. We have just had our first pick into the second round. I know that we're early in the season, people trying to get a feel for ADP and stuff. In our league, GNT went 101, which you'd expect. Our friend Ray traded up to 102, as the Jacksonville Jaguars did in real life, to take Travis Hunter. Lou got Cam Ward at 103. Cole got Omarion Hampton at 4. Then you came up at 5. You got Travion Henderson. Judkins went right behind you to Lou at 106. And then RJ Harvey went at 7. So 5 running backs in the first 7 picks. That allowed you to swoop in and grab Ted McMillan at 108. You traded back into the first round. Our friend Ricky went quarterback at 109, got Shedeur Sanders. Like some of the upside there. Tyler Warren went at 110. Then you were able to come back into 111 to get Caleb Johnson, the 5th running back to go. And then Emeka Ibuka went to Jacob at pick 12. The first pick of the second round was Jackson Dart. It is a super flex. I have noticed, I mentioned you're in a lot of rookie drafts right now. I'm in a lot of rookie drafts. It seems like the running backs are going up even higher and pushing up higher than I think what we even thought, which means players like Ibuka and Ted McMillan and the tight ends are sliding further into the back half of the first round in a lot of the drafts I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's so, with Warren going at 110, I felt like he was kind of the last player there. And I tried to get that. I made a trade offer for that, and I didn't get rejected, and I didn't get countered. I got ignored for 14 hours he was on the clock. 15
Yeah,
hours.
I don't know if he realized he was on the clock. A couple of us reached out to him in other venues, and he may not have looked at all of his.
So, anyways,
offer.
I was like, oh, let me see if I can get back in and get Warren. My team is very running back needy, and so I've got. So Ibuka was the last player left in the tier, and Caleb Johnson was at the top of the next tier. And because of team needs, I did trade in to get Caleb Johnson. Ibuka probably would have been the smarter move, but I didn't have that much space between the two of them in my post-draft rankings. And so I felt like I could justify it, even though they were different tiers, but I could always go ahead and change how my tiers are highlighted and put those two guys in the same tier if I felt like it.
Yeah, and I do think though, just the trend that I'm seeing so far, we wondered where it was going to shake out, where some of these running backs were going to go. I thought a lot of them would go in the first round, at least in the back half. But in almost every draft I'm in, you're getting 5 running backs going in the first 8 picks. And it's been – I think both you and I had Caleb Johnson as our RB5, but he's the one that's going at running back 6. Harvey sometimes is going as the 3rd running back off the board, sometimes 4, no worse than 5th in any of the drafts that I've seen so far. So he seems to be really flying and rising up. And the one that I think has been interesting to see sliding back and becoming, to me, a pretty great value in the 7 to 9 range or 6 to 9 range is McMillan.
Yeah. That's I've had a couple drafts where he's been there, and I'm like, I'm just going to go get him. I'm going to see if I can get him. So I like him. I think that's a good spot for him.
I think it's going to be interesting. We have a lot of these waves of May drafts, and we're getting a feel for them now. And then I have a whole set that will wait and kick off in July. I want to see where we're at with ADPs in July and looking and seeing where guys go. Because sometimes you see these drafts shake out and start to move in a different way. But I just thought, since it is draft season, we'd share some of ours. We'll keep you updated. I'm guessing by the time we get back together next Friday, our rookie draft will be over. I will have finally made a pick. I have to wait till 3/12 to have a pick in that draft, but we'll see.
I'm coming up on my first pick in my oldest dynasty league. We're at 4-2 right now, and I pick at 4/12. So
feels good when it gets going.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us today. If people are looking for something to fill up that time, Dennis, what can they do?
They can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like. I want to shout out Dennis and Christy today. I was on we have to get a new payroll company because the guy who owns ours is retiring and basically shutting down the business. There ain't nothing quite like a salesman who does a little bit of research. And after the introductions was like, hey, so I was listening to this podcast today, and I got to ask, are you a Gabe Davis truther?
Nice.
I said, well, I used to be. So we had a little fantasy football talk. I'm like, man, you know how to close a deal.
There you go. Well, hopefully you guys have a wonderful weekend. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Enjoy a taco on us on Monday, and we will see you guys next Friday.